constructive engagement. And I think all the community groups and the Oireachtas members have asked their questions, and now if Mr. Graham would like to respond, and Mr. Nolan or your team. And the way we try and do it, if you answer questions whichever way you wish, and then we'll go back to ones if the members feel they need further detail, and then if the actual community groups and the clubs, if they wish to, if it's okay, we just see what these answers are, and then if you want to make a further comment. I would hope to finish, if we can, say by 5 o'clock, if that's reasonable, and if it's not, we can extend it a bit longer, but I'm conscious of people's time as well, so you have the floor. Sorry, Ms.
Okay, I just might make a kind of an overview in response in terms of the questions, and then my colleagues in TII and my colleague Hugh might take some of the more detailed questions. So just want to say that, and to emphasise again, that this is an emerging preferred route, so it's not the final route. So, and what we're talking about is consultation on an emerging preferred route. So when you say that, then it's not fixed in stone. There is the facility to make amendments where feasible. So we are happy and welcome the statements that were made here today. And in terms of our opening statements, we just addressed the sporting facilities because we weren't aware that the representatives from the schools and residents representatives are going to be here. But that is just to say that we don't underestimate the impact on the schools and the residents as well. It's just that we didn't address it in our statements. So we don't underestimate the concerns of those, the representatives here today, and we will make every effort to clarify questions that groups have, particularly in this period up until the closing date on May the 11th, and if there is any more information that people need, if they contact TII through the various numbers and contacts, we will try and ensure that the information is available. So I'll just pass on to my colleague Hugh Cregan in terms of the detailed response.
Go ahead, Mr. Cregan.
Okay. If I start with some of Deputy Rock's questions, so some of them were quite detailed. The first one was, would we commit to announcing any change as soon as possible after the consultation AMC? The answer to that is yes. It'll take us a little bit of time to absorb all of the feedback, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of issues, not just these, there's a lot of other ones there. It will take us a little bit of time to absorb all that, but as soon as practicable after the end of that, we're conscious that people would like certainty, and certainly between ourselves and TII, we will try and get that announced as quickly as possible. In the event that tunnel boring launch move to a different location, are there implications? The short answer is yes, there are implications. The implications are probably cost. Every time you make a change, it has a cost implication, and we're very conscious. We have a certain allocation of money from the government, and it's very significant, but we have to deliver the project within that. There are possibly time implications, there are possibly implications then on residences and other things nearby, so it would all be about the specifics. Are we in relation to the numbers of truck movements, we actually haven't got to the stage of assessing individual truck movements. I think a couple of people provided information from the previous Metro North project, and I think we'd say that's probably in the right order, but we haven't got to the stage in the project that we have detailed information. We're at what we said, emerging preferred route stage. Has a human health assessment been undertaken? Not as yet. That's something that has to be done. You're absolutely right. That's usually done as part of what used to be called an environmental impact statement. It's now called an environmental impact assessment report. So at that stage, that would have to be undertaken and would be undertaken. I think there are some other consultation queries you had, which Michael will deal with in a moment. I think if I move to Deputy De Hart, there was a number of questions raised there. And I think one of the points he made that we hadn't highlighted the sports ground in our issues and challenges in the document, and you're perfectly right about that, but we had actually thought we had included under the issue of property acquisition. It's arising out of the temporary acquisition of the site, and we had thought we had covered it under that, but clearly not clear enough. As regards alternatives, I think you asked us what alternatives had been considered. There is a document available for download on the Metrolink site, and it does show all the alternatives that went through, and I would say all in all we probably have looked at over 100 alternatives for this scheme, and one by one teased through each of them to try and work out which is the best option to bring forward at this stage. So that's the case there. I think if I jump to Deputy Munster's queries, the rate of boring advancement, I think, was one issue she raised, and her American colleague that gave her some information. We've given a time range that which probably is the worst case scenario, and I think we're right to give the worst case scenario. I think if we were to sugarcoat it and say it's less than that, I think people would rightly be concerned. Whatever rate is technically possible, and I don't think it's as fast as the rate she's quoted, whatever rate is technically possible, that's the rate the tunnel would advance at each day. I don't think these size tunnels will get up to that particular rate of advancement. I think she also asked, was this going to be a PPP or an Exchequer funded scheme? We're operating on the basis that the government is allocating the funding from the Exchequer resources. However, I am conscious that the National Development Finance Agency have a role to play later on in advising whether that's the right decision or not. So we're advancing on the basis it's Exchequer funded, not a PPP, but I think that will get finally concluded later on. I think she also asked why it took so long to lay the tracks for Lewis Cross City, and I realise it's a different project, but her point was, did we learn any lessons from that? Lewis Cross City took as long as it did because we were being very careful going through the city centre of Dublin, where traders were expressing their views to us that they were struggling from a retail activity point of view. They needed us not to shut down the streets fully in the way that we might like to do it really expeditiously. And we had a very close engagement with TII and the traders for several years, and did the scheme in a way that kept their business operational and functioning. Mightn't have been the fastest way to do it, but had we done it the fastest way, that's not what they would have appreciated or wanted. I think Senator O'Kelly then mentioned extending the public consultation process, and I think you're quite passionate about that. The issue about that's the one that was raised elsewhere. The longer you extend it, the longer there is an uncertainty. So we're going to take that away and consider what is the right thing to do. There's pluses and minuses, as you can see. I think on Deputy Shortall had a number of queries. One was about a briefing of the public representatives. We're conscious that we did try to do that on the day of launch, where we organised a briefing session for all the public representatives. So that was what we tried to do at that stage. You also mentioned how many alternative sites we had examined for Glasnevin. We hadn't looked up the exact number, but we had a myriad of station locations looked at in that general area. So they're all in our document there, but it's in the, in terms of alternative, we looked at over 100 alternatives for the overall project. In terms of sites for specific stations, it's in the tens in each case that we would have looked at. I think, Michael, there's things that you might be able to cover then.
Yes, yeah, thanks you. Chairman, I suppose to start off, I'd like to say that we welcome the disengagement here today. I think it's very productive. And it was just good to hear all the views of the groups here today. But I just need to emphasise this is not the first time we're engaging in this. That we're engaging has started a few weeks ago, and that we give full commitment from NTA side and our own side to continue this engagement over the next weeks and a few weeks after then the closing of the public consultation stage. But just on public consultation, and as Anne said, it is an emerging preferred route. It is fluid to some extent, and there will also be more opportunity for public consultation. There's a statutory public consultation stage that will be once we publish the railway order, and there's a 6-week period, I believe, of statutory public consultation, and that's a very important obviously an opportunity for people to air their concerns and views to Bord Pleanála. I'd like to just say to all the groups that we will give a full commitment and to continue working on developing alternative solutions in the coming weeks, taking aboard the submissions that have already been made. We've submissions from many quarters, but also what we hear here today and what we will hear over the next few weeks with the clubs and the schools. Just one thing I need to say that's on the SCA, that we're very happy to meet with the SCA. That's absolutely, or maybe we'll arrange a meeting and to hear the views, and also maybe some clarify perhaps any of the confusing information that you've come across in looking at our route section reports and mapping. So if that's okay, maybe we can arrange maybe after this session we can arrange a meeting, arrange a time suitable to yourselves. and maybe we start engaging on that. I think Hugh has dealt with all the other questions. I'd just like to just respond to Deputy Shorthall. And as Anna here said earlier, we were informed today that we were dealing with Metrolink and the impact on recreational facilities, so we're unaware that the schools are here today, and that's the only reason I didn't address that in my opening statement. So that's my explanation for that. And obviously we kind of consider the schools, the sporting facilities and the community groups very seriously. And again, just to reiterate, we'll give full engagement and full commitment to work with this over the coming weeks.
I was going to say, is that it?
Well, Hugh
must be more. Sorry, go ahead, yeah. That's it. It's going to be it. Sorry, I just want to try and get an order on this now.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, that is your response to the questions. That's it. Right, okay.
Just a few questions, so I'm just happy to...
In fairness to the members, I think there were significant issues from lots of people that I didn't hear answered. I mean, even the question there, Deputy Ellis, you were talking about, you know, engineering costs to locate to Greenfield site, regardless. You know, what, I suppose the point is, you're talking about you have a cost-benefit analysis, and then you have to do, once after public consultation, you're going to have the preliminary costing of it, and then you have a further detailed costing, and then you go before the government for, you know, based on the totality of all the costs. I think what Deputy Ellis was asking, and I'm sure it's an implied question from other people, is, you know, how can you assure them and the public that you're looking at other alternatives, you know, that may be greenfield or otherwise? Is that your point there?
The point I was making, and it was just said there by Hugh, which I'm going to pick up on, that the analysis was done in the Glasnevin area on the basis of cost.
Yeah.
And he outlined that there. What I'm saying is that, do we weigh this up? It can go outside of the Glasnevin area, it can go up to the north,
sure,
or up towards the M50. But do we weigh up the cost of moving a club, reinstating all the facilities,
sure, yeah,
all these things, pitches, supplying pitches? Do we weigh all this up? Because when you look at it, and then the whole issue of destroying a whole community,
yeah,
you know, that's the real crucial thing
and
at the end of the day.
To me is the most, like, I mean, I'm not taking from the importance of the club, because that's hugely important, but the school is a structure, is a building,
Yeah.
and you can't just take it away somewhere. And the students, like I used to be teaching myself,
And you
like
can't
7
put a
years.
cost on
it's
that.
a whole cycle plus. It's a cycle plus 2 years, isn't it? So like it's a huge impact. And like the question you raised about danger, you know, children crossing and all of that, and noise, you can't teach in a noisy environment. But anyway, I think the point, if I can ask the question then, will you or can you look at, you know, the question of moving to a greenfield site, wherever that might be, in terms of the opportunity cost to you? Okay, there is an additional cost, but there's also, you avoid a lot of the other problems,
Yeah.
as you say, might otherwise arise. So if I can go back to the members now, and then I'll go to our guests here.
Could we get some answers about the
Yeah, well,
EIS and
yeah,
and
well,
a few
I
others?
just want to try and keep an eye. I have no issue with that.
Yeah.
I'm happy if members will take them whatever way you want. So we take with Deputy Alice then and Deputy O'Cady. Sorry, Shandor O'Cady and Shirley Kesher. I'll come back to you. Just put up your hand, lads. Don't be shy.
Ní bheith cháúmet son ní bheith má sin carcailiúr.
We can catch you up squarely.
Is féidir bheith scoilge. Okay. Dusach báide camera tá anmhaoch and Hugh, Michael agus Peter. Tá agam gúil sib dáríide. You're totally committed to doing your best you can from a Dublin perspective, from a transport perspective, and I take that on board, fully on board. We've met before, you've been in this committee before, and I just want to put that on the record. That for me, and I'm sure the committee are very appreciative of the efforts and commitment that you do have. Everybody here has mentioned the schools and Home Farm and Nafiana, their support for Metro North. There is strong support. We all believe that's a way to go. Dublin is the only capital city in Europe that there's no train link to whatsoever, and it has to be done. When I was doing a little bit of research on this, went back to 2005 when the government were speaking about this first of all. As Deputy Ellis said, he's aware of 30 or more consultations in relation to this, and God knows, as he said, how much it cost in the millions. I'm sure it has. I would suggest that extending the time, I think, would be very helpful, but you've got to ring fence extending time. You've got to say, I'm going to give an extra 2 weeks or an extra 4 weeks or whatever it is to it. I think that would mean an awful lot to the communities and to the sporting organisations and so on, to give them a chance to get their thoughts together. And I thought, from the Chair's perspective, I think that's a fantastic idea to look at offering some sort of financial support to these organisations to put a case in place. I thought it was a brilliant idea.
Or professional advice.
Or professional advice. I thought it was a fantastic idea. The other thing I just want to mention is, and I haven't had a chance to go through the website in detail, but did you consider having more above ground rather than boring down underneath, particularly for particular areas, or as they do in the UK and in other countries, like there's a tier process. You know, it could be much higher than road level, for example, and that seems to work quite effectively as well. Very often a lot cheaper than drilling down underground. That was just my other question.
Okay, right, okay. In Cashello, sorry, Chuck to the heart and then Chuck to short run.
And I don't want to let the opportunity go by without taking the opportunity myself to reiterate what my colleagues have said. That, look, I welcome this project, and I know from the NTA's perspective and the TI's perspective, you want to deliver it. I'd have queries about the south link of it, given that I represent a constituency that's basically abandoned, you know, from a perspective of modern infrastructure. It's for another argument, another day. You mentioned in your response that you looked at multiple alternatives. I'm just wondering, and you talked about 100 different alternatives, and in terms of specific sites, tens of alternatives. So given that this location is the one that's selected for, we'll say, entry under the ground, essentially, did it raise any red flags with you?